My name is Sally Miller. At 32 years old, I was leading a fulfilling life as a project manager at an IT company. One rainy Thursday evening, I was gripping the steering wheel, about to leave the company parking lot. That day, I had just wrapped up a meeting for a new project. While I felt somewhat tired, I was also filled with a sense of satisfaction. As I stopped at a red light at the intersection, a sudden and violent impact struck me. A car behind me crashed into mine at high speed. The collision caused my car to flip over, accompanied by the deafening sound of metal screeching as my world turned upside down. This might be the end. Oddly enough, I remained calm at that moment. In my mind, the faces of my family flashed by like a slideshow. My mother, Jean, my father, Richard, and my older brother, Morris. Before losing consciousness, I heard the wail of an ambulance siren. Strangely, I felt a faint sense of hope. Surely my parents would rush to my side immediately. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in the hospital's ICU. My entire body was in pain, particularly my right leg and ribs. According to the doctor, I had suffered internal bleeding, multiple rib fractures, and a severe laceration on my right leg, which required emergency surgery. "You were incredibly fortunate, Ms. Miller," said my attending physician, Dr. Wilson. If it had been a few minutes later. He didn't finish his sentence, but I understood perfectly. "We've already contacted your parents." A nurse informed me. "They were listed as your emergency contacts." I gave a small nod. I imagined my mother rushing into the hospital room with a worried look on her face. However, time passed and neither of my parents appeared. There were no flowers or visitors in the room, only the quiet sound of the IV dripping. Fortunately, my phone, though its screen was cracked, was still functional. For the first 2 days, I repeatedly called and messaged my parents. But there was no response. According to the nurse, the hospital had also tried contacting them several times, but my parents kept saying they were busy at the moment. On the morning of the 3rd day of my hospitalization, my best friend, Kate Jones, visited my hospital room. Kate had been on a business trip in another state, but upon hearing about the accident, she took a flight to come see me. "Sally, are you okay?" Kate rushed to my bedside. Her expression showed she had something difficult to say. "Kate, is something wrong?" I sensed the unease in my best friend's face. Kate let out a deep sigh and took out her smartphone. "Here, take a look." On the screen was an image of 3 people relaxing on Waikiki Beach. They were my parents and my brother Morris. The post was from the day before, and the caption read, "Celebrating Morris promotion. Enjoying a family trip in Hawaii." At that moment, it felt as if the world had stopped. While I was teetering on the brink of life and death, my family was enjoying a vacation in a Pacific paradise. The fact pierced deeper than the pain from my surgery. But why? My voice trembled. Kate gently held my hand as she explained. "Morris got promoted to department manager. It seems your parents planned a family trip to celebrate." I stared at the ceiling. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I couldn't even wipe them away. An IV was inserted into my right arm, and my left arm was immobilized due to a fracture. That evening, I finally received a text message from my mother. "Sally, I heard about your accident. Are you okay? We're in Hawaii right now celebrating Morris's promotion. I'll check on you when we get back." Those few lines encapsulated everything about our relationship. I was always an afterthought. It was always Morris first. It was a clear message that his promotion celebration mattered more than my life-threatening accident. I didn't even have the energy to reply and just lay there in my hospital bed. Listening to the sound of the IV dripping, I reflected on my life during those lonely hours. Memories from childhood began to resurface, one after another. Even as a child, there was a clear difference in how we were treated at home. Morris, 2 years older than me, grew up basking in our parents' affection. When his grades were good, the family celebrated. When mine were good, it was only natural. If Morris placed third in a sports day race, there was great excitement. If I came in first, it was met with a casual, "Well, good job." On my 10th birthday, my parents went to watch Morris' baseball game, postponing my party. During my high school graduation, they went to cheer for Morris at a statewide competition and missed my ceremony entirely. The same happened with college. Morris was sent to a private university with full financial support, while I had to rely on scholarships and student loans to get by. Even when I graduated at the top of my class, my parents didn't attend the ceremony, citing work commitments. Yet they never failed to be present for every milestone in Morris' life. His successes were celebrated as the family's triumphs, and his failures were indulgently dismissed as part of growing up. Yet, at every significant moment in my life, they never hesitated to ask me for money. Even as an adult, I tried my best to support them, thinking that if they were relying on me, it was my duty. But I decided then and there, I would never provide financial support again. A week later, I was discharged from the hospital. During that time, the only communication I received from my parents was that single message from my mother. Kate helped me with the discharge paperwork, and I planned to recover at her house for the time being. 2 days after my discharge, I suddenly received a phone call from my mother. Her voice was more frantic than I had ever heard before. "Sally, something terrible has happened." "What's wrong?" "It's Morris. Morris was in an accident." For a moment, my heart almost stopped. But my mother quickly explained the details. He was driving a rental car in Hawaii and got into a fender bender with a luxury vehicle. The insurance won't cover everything, and we need to pay the compensation. And just like that, her true intention became clear. "Sally, you have money, don't you? I heard you work for an IT company and have savings. Please help Morris." Through the phone, I could hear the sense of entitlement in her voice. It was as if my savings were automatically the family's emergency fund. "Mom," I said quietly, "I haven't even finished paying off my own medical bills yet. But this is an emergency." Her voice was laced with desperation. "Morris' future is at stake. If we don't pay the compensation, it could cause problems at his company." At that moment, something inside me snapped. Years of patience and endurance crumbled all at once. "Mom, where were you when I almost died in a car accident?" I heard the sound of her sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "Well, we were in Hawaii for Morris' promotion celebration." Yes, the Hawaii trip to celebrate Morris' promotion. While I was lying alone in a hospital bed, you were taking photos on the beach. "Sally, that's not true. We were told you were okay." "By whom?" "You never came to see me, so how could you possibly know I was okay?" A silence fell between us. "I can't give you any money," I said firmly. "I'm not cleaning up after Morris anymore. I have my own life to live." "Sally," my mother's voice shook with anger. "This is what family is about. When someone is in trouble, it's only natural to help." "Really?" I let out a bitter laugh. When I was in trouble, who helped me? What followed was a torrent of anger, threats, and emotional attacks from my mother. Traitor to the family. Selfish daughter. Heartless person. She hurled all kinds of accusations at me. After hanging up, I covered my face with trembling hands. Yet, strangely, I didn't feel fear or regret. Instead, I felt a lightness, as if I had been freed from a burden I'd carried for years. That night, I received a call from my father as well. My usually mild-mannered father's voice was uncharacteristically cold. "Sally, are you happy now that you've made your mother cry?" "Dad, I was crying too. Alone, in my hospital bed. You know how it is. Morris has a future ahead of him. His promotion is important for the family. So, my life isn't important." For a moment, my father was at a loss for words. but he quickly regained his usual tone. "This situation has shown me your true colors. You don't care about the family at all." Those words felt like the final drop, washing away any lingering attachment I had to my family. "You're right, Dad. I don't want to be part of a family that only considers me convenient when it suits them." For the next few weeks, my parents bombarded me with accusatory calls and messages. They even spread the story among our relatives, claiming I had abandoned the family. However, to my surprise, 2 of my aunts sided with me. One day, Aunt Lois came to see me and said, "Sally, thank you for standing up for yourself." She spoke with a serious expression. "Honestly, we've all talked about it before. Your parents' obsessive favoritism toward Morris." Another aunt, Amelia, made an unexpected confession. "I've struggled with your parents and Morris too. A few years ago, Morris borrowed money from my husband under the guise of an investment. He never paid it back, but your parents were so pushy in defending him that we stayed silent. They kept saying, 'Morris will repay it once he's successful.' But nothing ever changed. In fact, when we tried to bring it up, they turned it around and accused us of being too focused on money for a family." Aunt Amelia gave a bitter smile and continued, "We're not the only ones. Other relatives have similar stories, but no one dared to speak out. Your parents lose all sense of reason when it comes to Morris, and anyone who criticizes them is treated as an enemy of the family." Aunt Amelia's confession provided an answer to a question I had carried for years. Why had family gatherings gradually become smaller? Why had the relatives grown more distant over time? It all stemmed from my parents' excessive protection of Morris and their blatant disregard for everyone else in the family. "You know," Aunt Amelia continued in a lowered voice, "your grandfather was deeply concerned before he passed. He worried about Morris' lifestyle." I caught my breath. My grandfather, who had passed away 5 years ago, had been the most level-headed member of the family. He feared for Morris' future. He thought that being overly pampered had stunted his sense of responsibility. "But he was always proud of you, Sally. He admired how you carved out your own path through sheer determination." Hearing those words, tears welled up in my eyes. My grandfather had quietly but genuinely taken pride in my achievements during his lifetime. "But," Aunt Amelia added with a serious tone, "Morris' issues might be more severe than you realize. There are rumors that he's borrowed significant amounts of money from other relatives too, and each time, your parents have stepped in to clean up after him." "Do my parents even have that kind of money?" I asked, puzzled. Aunt Amelia shook her head. "That's the problem. They've reportedly exhausted their retirement savings for Morris." This revelation gave me a new perspective. My parents' behavior wasn't just favoritism. It was a form of codependency. By constantly covering up for Morris's actions, they were trying to validate their own judgment and parenting. It was a toxic, almost pathological relationship. Among the relatives, there's been a sense of resignation, Aunt Amelia said. Aunt Amelia continued her explanation. "When someone points out Morris' problems, your parents become furious and cut ties with that person. That's why everyone has chosen to stay silent and distance themselves. But your decision this time might be a significant step toward breaking that vicious cycle." I began to realize that my decision might hold a meaning far greater than just solving my personal issues. Since then, there have been small changes within the family, Aunt Amelia said with a smile. "Your courageous actions have inspired others who had been silent to start speaking up little by little." Her words stirred a deep sense of empathy within me. My choice had disrupted the distorted dynamics of my family as a whole. That night, while staying at Kate's house, I sat alone, trying to make sense of what Aunt Amelia had shared. I opened my laptop and decided to write down the events chronologically. Under the title, "A Record of Morris' Problematic Behavior," I began adding one fact after another. In high school, my parents pressured teachers to cover up his poor grades. In college, he caused a drunk driving accident, but my parents paid a settlement to make it go away. After starting his career, he borrowed money from relatives repeatedly, leaving my parents to repay the debts. And now, the accident in Hawaii and the subsequent compensation issue. It's like a criminal record. I muttered with a bitter smile. But this document meant more to me than just a record. It was evidence of the long-standing dysfunction within my family. The next morning, I decided to take a bold step. I made an appointment with a local law firm. "Ms. Miller," said Camilla Brown, a middle-aged attorney with a calm demeanor, as she greeted me. "What can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath and began explaining everything. The car accident I was in, my parents' indifference, Morris' accident, and the issues with his debts to relatives. "What I'm concerned about," I said, carefully choosing my words, "is the possibility that my parents might continue to make financial demands on me because of Morris' problems. Is there anything I can do legally to protect myself?" Camilla listened intently, taking notes with a serious expression. "Preventative legal measures are definitely possible," she began to explain. "First, I recommend sending a certified letter that clearly states your position. Additionally, if there are any monetary demands or harassment from your parents or siblings, you could consider obtaining a restraining order. Would it really be necessary to go that far?" I hesitated for a moment. "Ms. Miller," Camilla said in a gentle but firm tone, "family financial disputes like this can escalate into irreparable situations if left unchecked. Especially given that your parents have reportedly exhausted their retirement savings, this is a clear red flag." Her words felt like a reality check, forcing me to confront the situation. My parents were risking their own future to protect Morris, and they might be relying on my savings to fill the gaps. "I understand," I said, solidifying my resolve. "I want to take the necessary legal steps." That afternoon, I called Aunt Lois. "Aunt Lois, I just consulted with an attorney," I said. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before she responded. "That's a wise decision. I was planning to suggest that to you myself," she added. "This situation has gone beyond what can be resolved within the family." Those words confirmed to me that my decision was the right one. This was no longer just a family dispute. It was necessary to establish firm legal boundaries. A week later, a certified letter was sent to my parents and brother. The letter explicitly outlined the following points. I would provide no further financial support under any circumstances. Any financial demands or harassment would result in legal action. I was willing to forfeit my inheritance rights to the family estate. The last point was my own suggestion. By relinquishing my claim to my parents' assets, I aimed to eliminate potential financial disputes in the future. "I want this to be the end," I murmured quietly as I mailed the letter. That night, an unexpected call came in. The caller ID showed the name of my cousin, Kelly. "Sally, I need to tell you something," Kelly said, her voice trembling. It had been a long time since we last spoke. As children, we had been as close as best friends, but we had grown apart as adults. "It's about Morris." "I'm a victim too," Kelly said. My heart began to race. Kelly continued, 2 years ago, Morris came to me with an investment opportunity. He said it was for starting a new business and promised guaranteed profits. I closed my eyes. A familiar story was beginning to unfold. At first it was $5,000, but then he kept asking for just a little more. And eventually, I ended up investing most of my retirement savings, Kelly said. "And then?" I asked. I already knew the answer. Everything failed. Morris said it was because market fluctuations were unpredictable. But I found out later that most of the money had been used to pay off his debts. On the other end of the line, Kelly began to cry. I couldn't tell anyone. I was too scared my parents would get angry and say, "How could you doubt your family?" But after seeing you stand up with such courage, At that moment, everything clicked. Morris had been collecting money from the entire family, and my parents, fully aware of the situation, had been covering it up. "Kelly, have you talked to the police?" I asked cautiously. "No, but I can't take it anymore. It's ruining my life." "Okay," I said firmly. "Tomorrow, we'll go to the police together. I'll go with you." The next day, we visited the local police station. When we filed a fraud report, the officer revealed surprising information. As a matter of fact, we've received several similar complaints. All the victims appear to be relatives of the Miller family. Kelly and I exchanged glances. Morris' issues were far more serious than we had imagined. When I got home, I saw over 10 missed calls from my mother. A message came shortly after. "Why did you go to the police? Do you enjoy shaming your family? Withdraw the complaint immediately." I didn't reply. Instead, I called Camilla, my attorney. Just as expected. Camilla said calmly, "Let's move on to the next step. We'll file for a protective order with the court," Camilla said. That night, while sharing a bottle of wine at Kate's house, I opened up to her about everything. "Sally," Kate said, her expression serious, "you're doing the right thing. This isn't just a family issue, it's a crime." A few days later, a small article appeared in the local newspaper. Local banking executive accused of investment fraud among relatives. The aggressive messages from my parents continued, but my resolve was unshaken. A week later, I received a call from the police. Morris had agreed to a voluntary interview, and with it, shocking details came to light. The total damages exceeded $500,000. More than 10 relatives had fallen victim. The most staggering revelation was that my parents were being investigated as accomplices. "Your parents were aware of Morris' actions and even introduced new victims," the lead detective explained calmly. "We have no choice but to treat this as an organized fraud case." Those words marked the end of something inside me. There was no turning back now. This was the path I had chosen. As Aunt Amelia had said, my actions had indeed triggered a shift. But instead of mending my family, that shift revealed the darkness that had been hidden for so long. Life often takes us in directions we never imagined. Kate's words resonated deeply with me. 3 months after the investigation began, Morris was formally indicted. Fraud, embezzlement, violations of financial securities laws. The charges listed in the indictment covered multiple offenses. My parents were also charged as accomplices and indicted without detention. How did it come to this? On the day of the pretrial conference, I ran into my mother in the hallway. The once overbearing demeanor was gone, replaced by a face etched with deep fatigue. Her hair had turned white, her back was hunched, and she looked as if she had aged 10 years overnight. "Mom, this isn't my fault," I said quietly but firmly. "This is the result of the problems you chose to hide for years." She didn't respond, only weeping silently. My father didn't appear in court. Once a senior executive at a local financial institution, the scandal had forced him to resign after the company learned of the case. Later, Aunt Lois told me that he had withdrawn completely, isolating himself at home and refusing to speak to anyone. Morris' situation was even more shocking. After his arrest, he confessed to all the charges and made a startling admission. "I'm sick," he stated in his deposition. "It's recorded that I was diagnosed with gambling addiction 10 years ago, but I couldn't tell my parents. They believed I was their perfect son. I couldn't betray their expectations." According to the records, Morris had been frequenting illegal casinos since his college days. Even after graduating, he continued pouring massive amounts of money into online gambling. Whenever his debts piled up, he borrowed money from my parents and relatives, only to gamble it away again. The downward spiral grew deeper and more destructive. My parents tried too hard to protect me. Morris testified in court. Every time, they covered up my failures, so I never felt the need to change my behavior. Instead, I learned to look away from the problems. The verdict was severe. Morris was sentenced to prison. My parents received a suspended sentence. A week after the judgment, I met Morris in an unexpected place. The visitation room at the detention center. He had requested to see me. "Sally, I'm sorry," Morris said, his expression like that of a child. "You were right. Our family has been living on lies this whole time. Why did you want to see me?" I asked quietly. "I wanted to tell you that your choice was the right one. You went to the police and ultimately it saved me." Morris let out a deep sigh. "There's a rehabilitation program in prison. I can also get treatment for my gambling addiction. For the first time, I feel like I can genuinely face my issues." His words stirred complex emotions within me. The hatred and anger I once felt had gradually faded. What remained was a mixture of sadness and a faint glimmer of hope. The changes in my parents were even more dramatic. After the verdict, they moved to a small house in the suburbs. All their luxurious furniture and cars were sold to pay restitution to the victims. One day I received a letter from my father. To Sally. For a long time, I believed I was a good father. I thought that protecting and supporting Morris was my duty as a parent. But I was gravely mistaken. In trying to protect Morris, I ended up ruining his life. And yours as well. Now, as I spend my days in a quiet suburban house, I reflect on my life. Why couldn't I genuinely celebrate your successes? Why did I continue to turn a blind eye to Morris' problems? The answer lies in my own weakness. I was so focused on preserving the illusion of a perfect family that I refused to face reality. Now, even an apology feels too heavy. All I can do is thank you for your courage. Your actions pulled us back into reality. From your father. I still haven't received any direct contact from my mother. However, according to Aunt Amelia, she has started volunteering in the community. Specifically, she's participating in a support group for families dealing with gambling addiction. She's trying to change, little by little, Aunt Amelia said. For the first time, she's learning to acknowledge her mistakes. Time moves on slowly. Morris continues to serve his sentence in prison. My parents live a modest life, gradually paying off the restitution. And I've stopped yearning for a perfect family. I now believe that a family willing to face the truth, even through pain, is far more valuable than one built on lies. Sometimes on rainy evenings I think back to that accident. That impact was the catalyst that exposed the fractures in our family. It was a painful change, but it was necessary. I no longer find rain depressing. Rain, at times, is necessary to nurture new growth.